The boy lived in a small, worn-out house on the edge of town. The walls were thin, and the roof had a few leaks that let rainwater trickle in whenever there was a storm. Every corner of the house spoke of struggle, peeling paint, scratched floors, and cupboards that had seen better days. Despite all this, the house carried warmth because it was filled with the laughter and love of his family. But beneath the love, there was worry. Bills piled up on the small table by the door, and every day the mother would stare at them with a quiet fear that made her hands tremble. The father, a man who had once been full of dreams, now walked with a heaviness that made him look older than he was. Debt had taken over their lives. Each month, the numbers grew larger, and the deadlines pressed harder. They had borrowed money to fix the leaky roof, to buy food, to pay for medicines. Every small thing came with a price, and every price seemed impossible to meet. The boy saw it in the way his parents whispered late at night, trying to hide their fears from him, and he felt it in the tension that sometimes filled the air at breakfast. He was only 10 years old, but the worry had a way of creeping into his small shoulders. Despite the hardships, there was one corner of the house where he felt free. It was a tiny, upright piano that had belonged to his grandmother. The keys were yellowed with age, and a few had chipped edges, but to the boy it was a treasure. He loved the way the smooth keys felt under his fingers, even though he had never had a proper lesson. He would watch other children at school who had music classes, and sometimes he would feel a pang of envy, but mostly, he felt hope. The piano was his world, a place where he could escape the heavy weight of bills and fear. He would spend hours touching the keys, pressing them softly at first, listening to the small, timid sounds that came out. Sometimes he would try to make up songs, simple melodies that made him smile. Other times he would just tap the keys randomly, letting the sounds wash over him. The piano seemed to understand him. It didn't laugh at him when he made mistakes, and it didn't care if he didn't know the right notes. It was patient, and in its quiet way it made him feel strong. His mother noticed his love for the piano. She had always been gentle, with a soft voice that could calm storms. She would sit beside him and hum along while he played, even when the tune was messy and uneven. "One day, my little one," she said, "you will play something beautiful, something that will make people stop and listen." The boy nodded, his fingers dancing over the keys, imagining a day when the music could do more than fill the room. It could fill hearts. The father, on the other hand, was more practical. He worried that his son's time was being wasted on something that would not pay the bills. "Music is beautiful," he said one evening, as he sat on a creaky chair rubbing his tired eyes. "But we need to survive first. Learn something useful. Maybe one day when we are safe you can think about playing." The boy looked down at his hands and felt a little sting. He knew his father was right, but the thought of giving up the piano felt like giving up a part of himself. One chilly morning, the family received a letter. It was from the man who had lent them a large sum to repair the roof months ago. The tone was harsh and the words were sharp. The debt was due immediately. The family could barely afford food for the next week, and now this demand hung over their heads like a storm cloud. The mother's hands shook as she held the letter, and even the father looked unsure of what to do. The boy watched silently. He felt a mix of fear and determination. Something inside him told him that maybe, just maybe, he could help. He remembered the piano. It had always been a place of comfort, but now he wondered if it could be a place of power too. Could music really make a difference? Could the sounds he made on those worn-out keys actually help his family? The thought seemed crazy, but the idea planted itself firmly in his mind. He decided he would try no matter what. The next day he went to the community hall. It was a small building, not far from their home, where local children sometimes gathered to play or learn. A few old pianos were scattered around, and there were a few people practicing or chatting. The boy had seen some of the wealthier kids play there, and he felt a nervous flutter in his chest. He had never performed for anyone outside his family before. What if he made mistakes? What if people laughed at him? He found an empty piano in the corner. It was not as polished as some of the others, but it had a sound that seemed warm and welcoming. He sat down and placed his fingers on the keys. The first note he played was shaky, unsure, like a bird taking its first flight, but then slowly he found a rhythm. He let his feelings guide him, the fear, the worry, the hope, and the music began to flow. It was not perfect. There were notes that stumbled and pauses that lingered too long, but there was a raw honesty in it that could not be ignored. A few people stopped to listen. At first they whispered and exchanged glances, some smiling politely, others skeptical. But as the boy continued, something changed. The sounds he produced were simple, yet they carried a depth that surprised everyone. The notes told a story of struggle, of longing, of a small family trying to survive in a world that seemed unfair. The boy played with all his heart, not caring about applause or recognition. He only cared about the music and the hope it carried. Time passed quickly. Hours slipped by unnoticed as he played, completely lost in the music. When he finally lifted his hands from the keys, the room was silent. The boy looked around nervously. Would they clap? Would they laugh? Slowly, a few people began to nod, and one of the older women whispered, "He has something special." The boy felt a spark of pride, a warmth he had never known before. It was not just about the sound. It was about the power of what he had created. He went home that evening with a lightness in his heart. His mother hugged him tightly, sensing that something had changed. I think we might have a chance," she said, tears in her eyes. The father, still cautious, gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, music could be more than a pastime. The boy knew the path ahead would not be easy. The debt was still looming, and the world outside was not always kind to those who dreamed. But he also knew that he had found something no money could buy: courage, hope, and a way to speak without words. And for the first time in a long while, he felt that perhaps his music could make a difference. He practiced every day, sometimes early in the morning before the sun rose, sometimes late at night when the house was quiet and still. The piano became his companion, his teacher, and his refuge. Each note he played carried a piece of his heart, and slowly, he began to believe that one day, the music might be heard by someone who could change everything for his family. Even though the world outside was harsh and unforgiving, inside that small house and in the corners of the community hall, the boy discovered a truth: talent and determination, even in the smallest hands, could shine brighter than fear. And as the days passed, that little spark of hope grew, quietly, steadily, ready to light the way forward. By the time the next month arrived, the boy had a plan forming in his mind. He would play for someone important, someone who could help. He would not let fear stop him. He did not yet know how it would happen or what the outcome would be, but he knew this much: he had a gift, and it was time to use it. The journey ahead would be difficult, but the music was now his voice, and he intended to speak louder than the worries that had weighed down his family for so long. The boy woke up that morning with a mixture of excitement and nervousness swirling in his chest. The plan he had been thinking about for weeks was finally going to take shape. He knew he had to play in front of someone important, someone who could make a real difference for his family. The problem was, the world outside the small walls of his home had always been full of judgment and laughter at anyone who dared to try something different. He had seen it many times: people pointing, whispering, or shaking their heads when something did not match their expectations. Still, he could not let that stop him. His fingers itched for the keys, and his heart thumped in time with the thoughts of hope he had nurtured for so long. His mother packed a small piece of bread for him, and his father, though still worried, gave him a tight nod, as if passing on a silent encouragement. The boy carried a small bag containing nothing more than a notebook, a pencil, and a quiet determination. He did not need much else. He walked through the streets of his neighborhood, the familiar sounds of morning greeting him. Children were playing in the dusty lanes, dogs barked lazily, and the smell of fresh bread from the local bakery filled the air. But none of this eased the flutter in his chest. He was stepping into a world where people would look at him and judge him before he even spoke or played. He remembered his father's words, his mother's hope, and the quiet promises he had made to himself. When he reached the house of the man who had lent his family money, his stomach twisted into knots. The house was large and imposing, surrounded by tall gates and manicured gardens. The boy had never been this close to a place so different from his own home. The grass was perfectly trimmed, the windows gleamed, and every corner seemed to whisper wealth and comfort. He paused for a moment. As soon as the man saw him, he raised an eyebrow. The boy could feel the weight of the man's gaze like a physical pressure. He noticed the sneer forming on the man's lips, the kind of expression that said, "What is this child doing here? This is a world for adults, for serious people, not for a boy playing games." The boy swallowed hard. He had expected laughter, but the sharpness in the man's eyes cut deeper than he had imagined. "Who are you?" the man asked, his tone cold and dismissive. The boy straightened his back and said, I want to play music for you, please." His voice trembled, but there was a quiet resolve that made him stand taller than his small frame. The man chuckled, a short, sharp laugh that made the boy's stomach drop. "You, a child, play for me?" he said, shaking his head. "This is serious business. We don't have time for children's games." The boy felt a pang of fear. He had imagined this moment hundreds of times, but the reality was harsher than his dreams. He took a deep breath and replied, "It is not a game. I want to help my family. Please just listen." The man studied him for a long moment. Then surprisingly he shrugged and waved a hand toward the piano in the corner of the room. "Fine, if you must sit, but don't expect miracles." The boy approached the piano, his hands shaking slightly. The keys were cold under his fingers, but as soon as he pressed the first note, he felt a small surge of courage. He closed his eyes and let the music come from inside him. At first the sound was soft and uncertain, like a timid voice testing the air. But gradually the melody grew stronger, shaped by all the emotions he had been holding inside. The fear, the hope, the love for his family, and the longing for a better life. People in the room began to notice. The man's servants paused, the housekeeper leaned against the doorframe, and even a few neighbors who had come to see what the commotion was about stopped talking. The boy did not look at them. He played as if the piano was the only thing that mattered, as if every note could carry his heart and soul to those who were listening. At first, the man remained unmoved. He crossed his arms and tapped his fingers impatiently, but slowly the sound of the boy's music began to reach something deep inside him. There was no grand showmanship, no complicated techniques, only honesty. Each note seemed to tell a story of struggle, of fear, and of hope that refused to be extinguished. The man's laughter and sneers disappeared, replaced by a quiet stillness. The boy's fingers danced across the keys with a natural grace that could not be taught. There were moments when the music stumbled, when a wrong note slipped in, but somehow it only made the performance more human, more real. It was not perfection that touched the heart, it was truth. Others in the room began to whisper among themselves. "Where did this boy learn to play like this?" one servant murmured. "He's just a child, but listen. He is playing with his soul, not just his fingers," the housekeeper said softly. The boy, unaware of the murmurs, continued. He thought only of his family, of the debts that weighed them down, and of the life that could be better if someone just believed in him. Music had always been his escape, but now it was a bridge, a way to reach someone who could change everything. He poured everything he had into the piano, letting the music speak the words he could not. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes felt like hours. And yet, when he finally lifted his hands from the keys, the room was completely silent. The boy's chest heaved as he looked up, unsure what to expect. Would the man laugh now? Would he dismiss him again? The man's face was unreadable at first. Then slowly he removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and exhaled deeply. "I did not expect that," he said, his voice quieter than before. You have talent, boy. Real talent. And I think you may understand something about life that most adults forget." The boy blinked, barely able to believe his ears. You mean it?" he asked softly. The man nodded, though he still looked stern. "Yes, I mean it. You played with honesty. You played with heart. Most people don't know what that is anymore." He paused, and for the first time his expression softened. "I will tell you something. Sometimes it is not money that changes things. Sometimes it is courage, and sometimes it is a song." The boy felt a warmth in his chest. For the first time, he felt that his music could do more than fill empty rooms. It could touch hearts, open minds, and even change the course of a family's life. He looked at the man, waiting for what would come next. The man leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I will consider your family's situation. You played well enough to earn that much." He waved a hand, dismissing the boy with respect rather than scorn. The boy nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. This was more than approval, it was hope. When he returned home, he found his mother waiting at the gate, her eyes searching for any sign of what had happened. The boy ran to her, breathless, and said, "I played." And he listened. He really listened. Tears welled up in his mother's eyes, and she hugged him tightly, holding him as if she could never let go. His father stood quietly, Watching from a distance, a mixture of pride and relief etched on his face. He did not speak immediately, but the boy could feel the unspoken words. He had done something important. He had shown courage. He had used his gift not for applause or fame, but for love. That night, the boy sat by the piano in his own home. He did not play at first. He just ran his fingers over the keys, thinking about the day, about the man who had listened, and about the hope that now glimmered in his heart. He realized that people could be cruel, that they could laugh and dismiss those who seemed small or weak, but they could also be moved. They could be changed by honesty, by talent, by courage. He thought about the next steps. The debt was still there, looming and dangerous. But now he had a plan, and he had proof that his music could make a difference. He would practice even harder, not for recognition, not for praise, but for the chance to help his family. Every note he played would be a message, a bridge, a lifeline. In the quiet of his room, he made a promise to himself. He would not let fear or doubt stop him again. He would keep playing, keep reaching out, and keep hoping. The laughter of others would no longer matter, because he had discovered something far stronger, the power of his own courage, and the strength that came from using it. Outside, the night was calm, but inside the boy, a fire had been lit. It was a fire that would guide him through challenges, through ridicule, and through moments of despair. It was a fire born from music, from love, and from the determination to change his family's life. He touched the keys softly, letting a small, tender melody flow through the room. It was a song of hope, of persistence, and of dreams that refused to die. And in that simple melody, the boy realized something important. The world could be harsh and people could be cruel, but one small heart with courage and honesty could create ripples that might reach even the hardest places. That night, the boy fell asleep with a smile, knowing that tomorrow he would try again, and that someday his music would make the debt, and all the struggles fade away. The next morning, the boy woke up before the sun had even risen. There was a quiet determination in his chest that would not let him rest. Today was important. Today he would play again, and this time he would put everything into it. He had seen the man's reaction yesterday, and though nothing had been decided yet, a small spark of hope had been lit. That spark grew in his heart until it felt like a fire, urging him forward. He ate a small breakfast in silence. His mother watched him, sensing the resolve that burned in her son's eyes. She reached out and touched his shoulder. "Remember," she said softly, "it's not just about what others think. Play from your heart. Let the music speak for you." The boy nodded. Her words were like a gentle wind pushing him forward. His father, sitting at the other end of the table, gave him a long look. There was pride there, but also worry. The boy knew his father's fears would never completely leave him, but today, he needed to rise above them. The journey to the man's house felt longer than it had the day before. Each step was heavy with anticipation. He passed familiar streets, watched neighbors go about their routines, and felt the weight of what he was about to do pressing against his chest. People glanced at him curiously, some smirking at the small boy carrying a notebook and a bag. He ignored them. Their opinions did not matter. Today was not about them. It was about his family and the music that could help them. When he reached the gate, the man was already there, standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flicked to the boy and lingered longer than before. The boy took a deep breath and approached. I'm ready to play," he said simply. His voice was calm, though his fingers tingled with nervous energy. The man studied him, then nodded. "Very well. Show me what you can do," he said, gesturing toward the piano in the corner of the large room. The boy's heart thumped in his chest as he walked toward the instrument. The piano had been moved slightly since the last visit, its keys shining faintly under the morning light. The boy's hands hovered above the keys for a moment, and then he began. The first notes were soft, hesitant, as though testing the air. But slowly he found it. He thought of his mother's worry-lined face, his father's tired eyes, and the small, worn-out home that had sheltered his family for so long. Each note was a whisper of hope, a message that no matter how hard life seemed, courage and love could still shine through. The man watched silently. His stern expression remained, but there was something shifting in his gaze. The music was not just pleasant, it was moving. It carried emotion, truth, and a story that could not be ignored. He had heard many people play in his life, Many musicians with skill and training, but none of them had played with this kind of honesty. None had made him feel the weight of someone else's life in their music. The boy's fingers moved faster now, guided by his heart. The melody swelled, filling the room with sounds that were at once fragile and powerful. The man's housekeeper paused in the doorway, her hand resting against her chest. Even the servants who had grown accustomed to the quiet of their routine stopped what they were doing, drawn to the music. The boy did not notice them. He was lost in the piano, in the story he was telling with each note, in the hope that maybe, just maybe, his efforts would change his family's life. But not everyone was impressed immediately. A few people in the room whispered, exchanging glances. "It's just a child," one muttered. "Can he really do anything?" Another shook their head, doubt clouding their face. The boy, sensing the skepticism, did not falter. He knew that his music had to speak louder than their doubts. He closed his eyes and let the melody rise and fall with all the emotions he had been holding inside. The man, who had initially seemed so rigid, began to feel something he had not felt in a long time. There was a tightness in his chest, a stirring of emotions he had buried under years of business and money. He realized that the boy's music was not just notes on a scale. It was honesty, courage, and heart, all rolled into one. It was a reminder that life could not always be measured in numbers and debts. Sometimes it was measured in moments of truth like this. The boy's performance grew more confident. He added subtle flourishes, small expressions that revealed his personality and his struggles. There was a purity in the way he played, a lack of pretense that made every note land deeper in the hearts of those listening. He was not playing for fame, not playing for approval. He was playing for love, for hope, and for the life of his family. By the time he reached the middle of his piece, the room was silent. No one breathed, no one whispered. The air seemed to hold its own weight, heavy with the unspoken emotions stirred by the boy's music. Even the man who had spent his life judging others was now leaning forward slightly, his hands resting on his knees, unable to look away. The boy had created a moment that could not be interrupted, a story told without words but understood by all. When he finished, he held the last note, letting it hang in the air like a delicate thread. Then he slowly lifted his hands from the keys. Silence filled the room for a moment, almost too heavy to bear. The boy looked at the man, unsure what would happen next. Would he laugh? Dismiss him? Or... The man removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. He exhaled deeply, as though releasing a long-held breath. "That night was extraordinary," he said finally. His voice was softer than the boy had expected, tinged with something like awe. "I have heard many skilled musicians in my life, but never someone who plays like this. Never someone who can make music speak with such honesty." The boy blinked, not quite believing his ears. You mean it?" he asked quietly. The man nodded slowly. "Yes, I mean it. You have something special. Not just talent, but courage. Not just skill, but heart. And I think you understand more about life than most adults." The boy felt a wave of relief wash over him. For weeks he had wondered if his music could make a difference. Today he had proof that it could. But he also knew this was only the beginning. The debt was still there, looming, waiting for resolution. The man's approval was not a promise, but it was a chance, a door that had been cracked open. And that was enough. He thanked the man quietly and left the house, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The streets felt brighter than before, the air lighter, as if the world itself had acknowledged the courage he had shown. When he returned home, his mother rushed to meet him. Her eyes were wide with hope and anticipation. "How did it go?" she asked, almost breathless. I played," the boy said simply, and he listened. He really listened. Tears welled in her eyes, and she pulled him into a tight embrace. His father came forward slowly, his usual reserved demeanor softening. He patted the boy on the shoulder. "You did well, son," he said quietly. I am proud of you." The boy felt a warmth spread through his chest. For the first time, he felt that his efforts might actually change the course of their lives. That night, the boy sat at his piano in his small home. He played again, not for anyone else, but for himself and his family. Each note carried the hope that had grown stronger with every visit, every moment of courage, and every breath of determination. He played slowly at first, letting the music flow naturally, and then faster, with more expression. The melody told the story of struggle and fear, but also of hope, courage, and love. As he played, he thought about the people who had doubted him, who had laughed at his small size or inexperience. He realized that their doubts could not touch him anymore. He had faced skepticism and fear, and he had played through it. He had spoken without words, and his music had been heard. That realization filled him with a quiet strength that would carry him forward, even in the hardest times. Days passed, and the boy continued to practice diligently. Every morning he would wake early, run through his melodies, and refine his skills. He experimented with new tunes, tried different rhythms, and let his emotions guide the music. The piano became more than just an instrument. It was his voice, his refuge, and his way of connecting with the world beyond the small house he called home. The man, in the meantime, had not forgotten the boy. He found himself thinking about the music, about the honesty in every note, and about the courage it took for a child to play so fearlessly. There was a subtle change in him, a reminder that not everything in life could be controlled or measured. Sometimes beauty and truth came from the most unexpected places, and the boy had shown him that lesson in a way that would not be forgotten. For the boy, the world felt full of possibilities. The path was still uncertain and the debt still loomed over his family, but now he had a purpose that gave him strength. He knew that courage, talent, and determination could reach places that money and fear could not, and as he sat at the piano each night, letting the music flow freely, he believed that someday, the right people would hear him, and his family's struggles would fade into memory. The boy felt a mixture of hope and fear as he walked toward the man's house once again. Over the past few days he had practiced endlessly, refining the melodies he had played before. Every note, every chord, carried the weight of his family's struggles and his own desire to make a difference. The man had listened to him before, but this time the boy knew he had to give more than music. He had to give everything he had inside. His mother walked him partway, holding his small hand in hers. "Remember," she said gently, "play with your heart. Let them see who you are and not just the music. Courage is in every note you touch." The boy nodded, feeling the warmth of her words. His father gave him a brief, encouraging smile, and for a moment he felt that he carried both their hopes and their strength along with him. The journey through the streets felt different that day. Perhaps it was the sunlight catching the dust in the air, or perhaps it was the quiet determination in his heart. But the world seemed less threatening. People glanced at him curiously, but he did not notice. His mind was fixed entirely on the piano, on the man, and on the chance to help his family in a way he had never dared to imagine before. When he arrived, the man was waiting at the door, his expression unreadable as usual. This time, though, there was a faint look of curiosity in his eyes, as if he had been thinking about the boy and his music since the last visit. "Come in," the man said, not dismissive this time, but calm. "Let's see what you have for us today." The boy approached the piano carefully. It seemed to hum under his fingers as he touched the keys, the instrument responding to the eagerness and tension in his heart. He closed his eyes and began to play. This time his music was bolder, more confident, but still full of the emotion that had captured the man's attention before. He poured everything into the melody, the fear, the hope, the love for his family, and the quiet determination that had been growing inside him for weeks. The room was quiet, but the silence was different from before. It was not just stillness, it was anticipation, as though everyone present sensed that something important was about to happen. Servants paused in their tasks. The housekeeper leaned against the wall, and even the man himself was watching intently. The boy's fingers danced over the keys, weaving a story that spoke of struggle, courage, and the unyielding hope of a small family fighting to survive. This time, the man's expression softened even more. He could not take his eyes off the boy. Every note carried an honesty that touched him deeply. He felt a stirring of compassion and respect he had not expected to feel for a child. The boy's music was not just sound. It was truth in its purest form, a reminder that life could be measured in more than debts and numbers. As the boy continued, the music grew richer and fuller. He experimented with different rhythms, adding subtle variations that made the melody even more compelling. He let himself feel every emotion fully, allowing the piano to carry his heart. The music filled the room, and slowly the man began to lean forward in his chair, as if drawn closer by an invisible thread. He listened without judgment, without interruption, completely absorbed by the story unfolding in front of him. Other people in the room began to react as well. Whispers of admiration passed between the servants and housekeeper. "He's incredible," one murmured. "I've never heard anything like this before." Another nodded silently, eyes wide with surprise. But no one dared speak aloud. The music had created a moment that transcended words. Even the rich and powerful man, who had grown accustomed to controlling every situation, felt powerless in the presence of such genuine talent and emotion. When the boy reached the final part of his piece, he let the notes linger, soft and delicate, as if carrying a message directly from his heart to everyone listening. Then slowly he lifted his hands from the keys. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, weighted with emotion, with admiration, and with the realization that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The man remained still for a long moment. Then finally he spoke, his voice quiet and deliberate. "Enough," he said. "You have done well beyond my expectations. You have not only shown talent but courage, honesty, and determination. That is something rare even in adults. You have impressed me greatly." The boy's chest swelled with a mixture of relief and pride, but he did not allow himself to celebrate yet. He knew that his goal had not been praise. It had been to help his family. He looked at the man, hoping that his next words would carry the possibility of change. The man leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "I have considered your family's situation," he said slowly. "I have seen your courage and I have seen your heart. I want to help. I will forgive the debt." The words hit the boy like a wave. Forgive the debt. The heavy burden that had loomed over his family, the source of so much fear and anxiety, would no longer be there. He could hardly believe it. His heart raced and tears filled his eyes, but he held them back, knowing that this moment was larger than himself. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much." The man nodded, a rare warmth softening his features. "It is not just the music," he said. "It is your courage, your determination, and your honesty. You reminded me of something important. Life is not just about money and power. Sometimes it is about the small acts of courage that touch hearts and change lives." The boy left the house with a lightness he had never felt before. The streets seemed brighter, the air fresher, and even the wind felt like it was carrying hope. He ran the rest of the way home, eager to share the news with his parents. When he arrived, his mother was standing at the gate, her face pale with worry. The boy hugged her tightly, laughing and crying at the same time. "It's gone!" he shouted. "The debt? It's gone. He forgave it!" His mother sank to her knees, clutching his small hands. Tears streamed down her face as she hugged him, whispering prayers of gratitude and relief. His father stood nearby, shaking his head in disbelief, and finally he allowed himself to smile. I can't believe it," he said softly. "You did this. You played, and you changed everything." The family sat together that evening, the first time in months that they felt completely free of worry. The boy played the piano, not for anyone else, but for the pure joy of it. The music filled the small house, echoing off the walls and into the hearts of everyone inside. It was a celebration of hope, of courage, and of the small victories that could change lives. Over the next few days, the boy continued to practice and play. Word spread quietly about the child who had moved a man with his music. People in the neighborhood came by, curious to see the boy whose courage and talent had changed the life of a family. The boy remained humble, focusing on the joy of music and the love for his family, rather than on the admiration of others. His parents, too, were changed. They had always worried and struggled, but now they could breathe a little easier. They had seen firsthand how talent, honesty, and courage could open doors that seemed impossible to reach. They encouraged the boy to continue, to let his music be his voice, and to never doubt the power of his heart. The piano became more than an instrument. It became a symbol of hope, of resilience, and of the strength that lay within the boy and his family. Each note he played was a reminder that even in the darkest moments there could be light, and that small acts of courage could ripple out to touch the lives of others. The boy's life slowly began to change, not just because the debt was gone, but because he had discovered something far more valuable: belief in himself. He had faced fear, ridicule, and uncertainty, and he had emerged stronger. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. And with that knowledge, he felt ready to face whatever challenges might come next. Evenings in the house became filled with music. The mother would hum along and the father would sit quietly, listening, sometimes with tears in his eyes. Neighbors would occasionally stop by, drawn by the melodies, and they too would feel the warmth and honesty of the boy's music. It was no longer just a tool to lift burdens, it was a gift, one that brought people together and reminded them of the beauty of human spirit. The boy would sometimes sit quietly after playing, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first hesitant notes on the old piano, the laughter and doubt he had faced, and the long hours of practice. Every struggle, every fear, every tear had led to this moment, and he understood now that the power of music was not just in the sound, but in the courage and heart of the one who played it. As the night settled over the small house, the boy played a final melody, soft and gentle, as if singing a lullaby to the world itself. The notes carried the gratitude, hope, and love that had grown in him over weeks of struggle. And in that music he knew that the future, though uncertain, held promise. He had changed the course of his family's life, not with words or money, but with something far more powerful: honesty, courage, and a song from the heart. After the debt was forgiven, life slowly began to feel lighter for the boy and his family. The house that had once felt heavy with worry now carried a quiet sense of relief. The walls, though still chipped and worn, seemed to hold more warmth. The air was no longer thick with tension, and even the small daily struggles felt less oppressive. Yet for the boy, the relief was not enough. He had tasted the power of his music, and he knew that it could do more than just lift burdens. It could change lives, inspire hearts, and create hope where there was none. Each morning, he woke up before the sun, drawn to the piano as if it called to him. He practiced tirelessly, not just to perfect his technique, but to find ways to express more of himself. His fingers moved more confidently now, guided not only by memory but by feeling. Each note carried layers of emotion: joy, fear, hope, love, and resilience. He began to compose small melodies inspired by the life around him, the people he saw, and the dreams he held close to his heart. His parents noticed a new light in him. The boy, once quiet and hesitant, now held a calm confidence. He smiled more freely, laughed more openly, and spoke with a quiet assurance that came from knowing his courage had mattered. They encouraged him, gently reminding him that while the music was his gift, it was also a way to continue shaping the world around him. The mother often said, "You have a way of touching hearts. Never forget that." His father, more reserved, would nod in agreement, quietly proud of the boy who had turned a family's hardship into a story of hope. Word of the boy's talent began to spread. Neighbors, local shopkeepers, and friends of the family came to hear him play. They were drawn not by fame or expectation, but by curiosity and the stories of courage they had heard. Each performance, even in the small living room of their modest home, was met with awe and admiration. People whispered about the boy who could make music speak louder than words, who could touch the heart of anyone who listened. Yet the boy never let praise distract him. He played for love, for hope, and for the lives of those around him. One afternoon, a small group of people from the community hall visited. They had heard about the boy and wanted to offer him an opportunity to play at a local gathering. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nerves. Performing in front of a small crowd was very different from playing at home, but he knew he was ready. His parents encouraged him, reminding him that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. With that thought, he walked to the hall, his heart beating fast but steady. The hall was modest, but it had a piano that gleamed under the light. People began to gather, chatting quietly as they waited for the boy to start. Some were skeptical, others curious, and a few were simply excited to see what the stories had described. Let the music speak and trust in your own courage. Then he sat down and began to play. From the first note, the room fell silent. The melody was gentle at first, delicate like a whisper. Then it grew richer and stronger. The boy let the music flow naturally, shaping it with emotion, filling the hall with the story of a small family, their struggles, and their unwavering hope. Every person listening felt the truth in each note. It was not just skill, it was honesty, courage, and the pure desire to touch hearts. As he played, he noticed the faces in the audience. There were smiles, tears, and expressions of quiet wonder. A few children in the front row leaned forward, eyes wide, captivated by the sound that seemed to carry magic. Some adults wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the depth of emotion that a small boy could convey through music. The boy did not stop for applause or attention. He played for the story, for the hearts that needed to hear it, and for the hope that had carried him this far. After the performance, people approached him, expressing their admiration and respect. "You have a gift that is rare," one woman said softly. "You play with honesty and heart. Thank you for sharing it with us." Another man nodded, eyes shining. "I have never seen anything like it. Keep playing and never stop believing in yourself." The boy smiled, humble yet proud. He knew that praise was not the goal, but it was a reminder that his music had the power to move others. The experience at the hall changed the boy. He realized that music was not only a way to help his family, but also a way to connect with people, to inspire them, and to remind them of the power of courage and hope. He began to dream bigger, imagining a future where he could play for more people, touch more lives, and use his gift to make a difference in the world. Yet despite the growing recognition, he remained grounded. He continued to practice in the quiet of his home, finding joy in the simple act of making music and in the love of his family. As the months passed, the boy's reputation grew. Local events invited him to play, small gatherings of musicians sought his company, and people from nearby towns came to hear him. Each time he played with the same honesty and emotion, never letting success make him forget why he had started in the first place. His family supported him at every step, proud of the courage and determination that had transformed their lives. The mother would often sit beside him while he practiced, humming along softly, while his father watched quietly from the corner, a faint smile on his face. Despite all the opportunities and praise, the boy never lost sight of the lessons he had learned during the struggle. He remembered the fear, the laughter, the skepticism, and the hard work it had taken to reach this point. Each performance was a reminder that courage, honesty, and persistence could open doors that seemed impossible. He also remembered the man who had forgiven the debt, and he often thought of him with gratitude, understanding that a small act of understanding and kindness could change lives profoundly. Life at home also grew brighter. The family, freed from the burden of debt, found small joys in daily life. They repaired the house slowly, fixing leaks, repainting walls, and making the home a warmer and happier place. Meals were more regular and the atmosphere became lighter. The boy's parents encouraged him to continue playing, but they also reminded him to enjoy his childhood, to laugh and play, and to live fully in the moments he had. One quiet evening, the boy sat at the piano alone. He played a new melody he had composed, soft and gentle, reflecting on everything he had experienced. The notes told a story of struggle and fear, but also of courage, love, and hope. As he played, he felt a deep sense of peace. He understood now that life would always have challenges, but he also had the tools to face them: courage, determination, and the power of his music. He realized that his journey had been about more than just saving his family from debt. It had been about discovering himself, his strength, and his ability to make a difference. He had learned that even a small person in a small house could change the world in meaningful ways. He had faced doubt, ridicule, and fear, and had come through stronger and wiser. The boy's story began to inspire others. People in the community admired his courage, and they encouraged their own children to follow their passions no matter how small or impossible they seemed. Teachers and neighbors would tell the story of the boy who had played from his heart and changed the course of his family's life. His music became a symbol of hope and determination, showing that honesty, courage, and love could overcome even the greatest obstacles. Years passed, and the boy continued to grow. He honed his skills, explored new styles of music, and performed in more places. Each performance carried the same honesty and emotion that had first captured the heart of the man who had forgiven his family's debt. The boy never played for fame or recognition. He played to share his heart, to inspire courage, and to remind people that even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. At home, life was filled with laughter, warmth, and music. The parents were proud, not just of their son's talent, but of his courage, determination, and heart. They knew that he had discovered something rare, the ability to face fear, to act with honesty, and to use his gift to touch lives. And in the quiet moments when the house was still and the boy's fingers danced across the keys, They felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. One evening, as the boy played a soft melody by the window, he looked out at the world beyond and smiled. He understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but he also knew that he had learned the most important lesson of all: courage, honesty, and the willingness to follow one's heart could create change far greater than any obstacle. He had faced fear, embraced his gift, and transformed not only his own life but the lives of those around him. The boy's music continued to carry hope wherever he went. It reminded people that even in difficult times, love and courage could prevail, and as he played, he felt a quiet confidence knowing that he could face whatever the future held. The journey had not been easy, but it had shown him the power of persistence, the value of honesty, and the extraordinary impact of a small heart determined to make a difference. In the end, the boy understood something profound. Life was not measured by wealth, possessions, or the approval of others. It was measured by the courage to act, the honesty to stay true to oneself, and the love to touch the hearts of those around us. And with that understanding, he continued to play, letting his music be the voice of hope.